A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to Nerf Secrets Revealed Aftersought Part 2. And so, having talked about various blasters over the past couple of months, it's a bit hard to imagine exactly what else I could possibly discuss in regards to certain blasters, basically ones that are not deemed recent. I did talk a bit about the Ranger PD5 as well as the N series for the very first time. But wouldn't you know, we got another new series to talk about. So with that in mind, I happily present the Pro series. Yep. It all started some time ago with a heavily modified Strife blaster known as the Strife X. But since then, more original blasters have come around here in 2024. This is one of two that are currently around, which they dubbed the Torrent. I mean, it just straight up rips off the Super Soaker blaster of the same name, Torrent. So, Total will be its blaster name. So, say hello to the Pro Total. Yep, that's what it is. Much like when I talked about the N series Pointer, we got another type of ammo variation to work with here. And as you can see, you have 15 darts that you can load into this nice long mag, which is tailored exclusively for this blaster. But if you take a look right here, we basically have a bit of a cut down AccuStrike dart that is simply labeled as the Pro Dart. And these Pro Darts, unlike the ones that were basically engineered for the Strife X, are in fact made to work with these newer blasters from the Pro series. And so, with the Total as well as the new Sender, which I have yet to pick up, but maybe I'll consider doing that, it does seem that Pro is going to be yet another attempt from Nerf to utilize this supposed short dart design, similar in a way to calibrated Steffens as well as other short dart blasters that have existed for many years now. In the same way that we've also had a lot of gel blasters, including the Exploders series and gel blaster toys, the way that they were able to introduce gel fire. The thing is that Nerf has technically been playing a lot of catch up, and even then still ripping off a lot of well-known series that are technically more public domain than being a true trademark to one particular company. So the thing is, I would almost consider this to be much like with Disney, for instance, where they have adapted loads of different stories over the years. Like Winnie the Pooh, we know, is more of a concept that dates back to many years prior when it were made into books. And Thomas and Friends had the same thing too. They're not a Mattel thing, like with Hot Wheels. The thing is, lots of franchises, lots of toys, lots of series in general, including Nerf, were not in fact from major companies like Hasbro, Mattel, Disney, etc. Nerf was originally a name that was put together by Parker Brothers in the 1960s with the famous Nerf ball, and then within 20 years there came along the Blast-A-Ball, and within that point as well there was Lonnie Johnson and his little Super Soaker invention, which took the world by storm when it came to water gun fights in the 90s. And of course, with those, the Nerf guns and all that good stuff, they all were basically bought out by Hasbro. And since then, this is what we have today to work with. And I'm going to tackle another big part of history right here by showcasing you just what you're looking for. Ooh, that prime was a little hard actually. Woo, man. So, what I'm seeing here is some insane performance. Like, I haven't fired this out in the open, but I could sure tell you, that is wild. Holy crap. 90 feet, I can just tell right from the get-go. Holy crap. I feel like I've misjudged this a bit. So I guess with that in mind, these so-called Steffen ripoffs impressed me so well that I'm already willing to give this a high scoring. So, based on blaster functionality, what we have here is a 15 dart magazine that holds 15 of these Pro Darts, which are, like I said, they're very different from the Strife X darts, as well as the magazines being different than the Strife X in general. So it's almost like the Pro Series wasn't entirely meant to be something of one uniform design from the get-go, but with two blasters that we have in addition to the Strife X, these two blasters are different in many ways compared to the Strife X, basically forcing us to purchase different magazines and darts rather than use the same ones that were made for the Strife X. And it could make sense in some ways because this magazine is tailored specifically for the Totals magazine well, which is situated within the grip itself. And as for priming it, ooh, gosh, it's a pretty tough pull. I mean, there's a lot of heavy feel to this one in comparison to other primes, and it's mostly because it has a very tough spring in there. The springs in this thing alone are much tougher, like 4 times more stronger in comparison to a majority of springers. And I have dealt with lots of spring-loaded blasters over the years from Nerf and even other companies, but this blaster definitely has an insane feel to it that I just am not expecting to go down all too well. But since I'm able to handle it just fine, I'd say it does pretty well for itself. In terms of how it primes, it's basically like this. You just pull this whole thing back, which is already insane. I mean, look at this. This ginormous white piece on the outside is essentially the priming handle. Why couldn't they have just basically limited it to the bottom? It's probably beyond me. They could have just made a cutout at this part here and maybe some new colors here, because the whole color scheme itself is pretty simplified with the likes of orange, dark gray, and white. And there's not that much detail or graphics or anything of any sort on the shell itself. However, you do have the Nerf Pro logo over here, just to let you know that it's the Pro series, not just Nerf. Kind of like how they were able to put Ultra, Super Soakers, Mega, Mega XL, and other such sub-series names in the form of giant logos in their own way. But here it's Nerf Pro. I don't know how Pro could have just been its own particular logo to represent a certain subsidiary of a large company well known in the toy industry. And of course, when you prime it fully, you just pull the trigger to fire. There's a safety switch here, much like what we had in Hyper Blasters and Gel Fire Blasters and Rival Blasters. So it's nice that Nerf has been really catering to the likes of older audiences, especially mid to late teens. But being 25 going on 26, I myself would have never imagined that, of course, a series like this with darts that surely can fly very far, hit pretty hard, and soar through the air with bird-like grace. I mean, just aiming at an angle, yeah, pure history I'm seeing in the books. Well over 90 feet these things are going. So I'd imagine if I'm doing a third season of distance gauge, these things will definitely go way over the 100-foot long meter that I had gotten from Milwaukee Tool. And I have been using standard for those episodes since then. Of course, one thing I probably ought to test here is slam fire. So I'm gonna test that out real quick. Well, looks like I can't do that. And just to be sure, do I have any more? Well, looks like I don't. Yeah, and I will probably stress in the fact that magazine release isn't quite as good as I would have hoped for. I would have expected something maybe like forward facing like this, but then again, because of the clearance between the priming handle and the trigger itself, and the fact that there's also the safety button here now, I could see why they decided to make it more of a side release. But it's kind of difficult to do with your thumb since you gotta press pretty hard. I can imagine more like this, with your thumb and index finger like this, where you can press them in unison. It does feel like that could do a lot better. But then again, we don't quite have much time on that part, so time to get the Invisibullets ready to go. I can imagine that this thing is going to be way more powerful than most of the other blasters I've done so far. So, well, let's just see how it goes. Ow. Oh gosh. Oh man. That was a doozy right there. Like, well, looks like I blazed through the entire clip already. So yeah, a very powerful SMG equivalent. The shape alone does make sense, and the nice big magazine adds it even further. So in terms of how I give my final verdict of this blaster overall, this is a nice magazine with 15 darts. It's a nice big capacity, not like 18 dart mags, but still does well in its own way. It's got a nice, I don't know if this is supposed to be a sling mount or something, but whatever. It's got some good prime action to it, albeit it's a bit of a workout in its own way, so you definitely want to pack on some protein if you can. Yeah, the sound alone is a bit frightening. I can imagine some people are a bit sensitive about gun violence, so they think of this as a real weapon. Oh boy, it might be the end of my career. All my research ruined. But of course, this blaster itself, it overall does alright for what it is, and it does have some insane performance. Like, I could more or less imagine Distance Gauge Part 3 coming into play and basically giving us something that I would never expect to show up. Also, I might as well just say, a stock adapter on a blaster like this? Are there gonna be stock attachments for this? Yeah, I feel like I could be jinxing it. The Dart Tag Quick 16 supposedly was gonna have stock attachments for this, but at least in this case, we have an optional piece that comes off and comes on in order to reveal and unreveal a stock adapter point. So at least we do have an actual stock to work with, even if they don't introduce any stocks to this particular lineup. So with another blaster known as the Sender, I ought to get that one as soon as I can. But how do I feel about the total in comparison? It's an okay blaster for what it is. It's got some insanely hard-hitting marks. Performance of the darts is astounding. Capacity does quite well for what it is. The lack of slam fire doesn't do a very good job at it anyways, even if it could, because of how hard the priming would be to do alone. And then of course, with the entirety of the shell being a priming part, it just seems a bit unnecessary. So it does kind of even things out, making this a more neutral pick in comparison with other things. So overall, my scoring for this is probably only going to be a bit of a meager 6.5 out of 10.1. Not necessarily anything that's considered great about this blaster, but considering that this is a series meant to give us an overall feel of what Nerf's capable of doing in response to all those Stefan dart blasters and all those other things we've gotten over the years, well, maybe the Sender should give us a whole different outlook on Nerf's overall catalog. I'll see you guys some other time with some more of this stuff in the future.